Hi, I'm Krisha. I'm going to be presenting my LabVIEW code for homework one. And for homework one, we are trying to achieve finding the junction capacitance for a silicone PN junction transistor when it is under reverse bias conditions. So I'm going to start off by describing my block diagram. I have 5 inputs and 3 outputs, and the center contains the code that does all the math. So my 5 inputs are my temperature, my capacitance at a zero reverse bias, my acceptor concentration and my donor concentration, and my reverse bias voltage. And then my 3 outputs are my thermal voltage, my built-in voltage, and our junction capacitance. So looking at the code, we calculate each of these things separately. So the first line we have our thermal voltage, our second line we have our built-in voltage, and our last line it finally calculates our junction capacitance. So looking at the code, there is obviously it's not a problem. The code runs as intended, but for for readability and for possibly somebody looking at this later on, the I have placed in the constant values of K, E, and Ni as their values instead of assigning a variable to K, setting its value, and then using K in my code because that simply was not working. It would not run if I set K equal to its value, set equal to its value, and set Ni equal to its value. It would not run. So currently we're working with a code that is probably not as robust as it can be, but it does work. So now I'm going to move on to our front panel. Okay, so as you can see for our front panel, there are our 5 inputs on the left and our 3 outputs on the right. So for VR, our value has to be less than 0. So I was sure to set a limit on that block that if I put in a value that is above 0, it simply would not run as intended. As you can see here, I have run a VR value of 5, and our junction capacitance was not calculated as it's the only one of those 3 outputs that require a VR. So we had a thermal voltage in our built-in voltage that went ahead and got calculated since it does not require the use of VR. So now we can use a value like -1. Um, okay, so specifically the reason I use VR for -1 is I did sample calculations in my report to prove that the code was working as intended. And the way I did that was by picking a value for VR and solving it by hand and throwing it all in a calculator and getting final values and then comparing it to the values my code gave me. And they matched perfectly. The other 4 values are determined by the default values given to us in the homework instructions. Um, as you can see, our values, okay, that's probably not the best one. So if we change that, it results in more changes. Um, so that is all I have for my code. Thank you for watching.